Homebuyer Seminar, November 21st, 2025. We're rip roaring here, ready to go. We want to talk about some stuff. Okay, Patricia, ball in your court. What do you want to talk about?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for watching today. So, we wanted to bring up a topic to just give you guys some knowledge. A lot of first time buyers and even buyers that are looking to supplement their mortgage income, maybe they're existing homeowners, but a lot of people are interested in multifamily units, whether it's buying a duplex, a triplex, or even a fourplex, because of the excitement of having extra income, right, to help supplement your mortgage. And so there are some really important details in buying units, especially when they're occupied. So, number one, you want to confirm what the rental value is because you want to know if the tenants are paying market rent or are they paying below market rent. If they're paying below market rent, then you have that opportunity to add value in the future to yourself, increase your cash flow, and raise the rent every year. You also have to look at the area. Is it rent control? Most of LA is. If you're looking in Long Beach and other areas, you'll find some unincorporated areas that are not rent control. Now, if the units are already occupied, you also have to find out if the current tenants are month to month or if they're under a lease. If they're under a lease, you definitely want to know what the lease terms are because you're going to be inheriting that lease and the tenant. Now, in our case, Shannon and I, we just opened up an escrow on Monday, and the it's a duplex, and the both units are occupied. When I was talking to the listing agent, I had mentioned that I my client really needed to occupy one of the units, and therefore I stipulated that in our contract, in our offer that I sent over. And in talking to the agent, he said, yeah, I'll walk my seller through vacating one of the units so we can deliver the property with one unit vacant for you. Great. I talked to my client. She's excited about it. We submit the offer with that condition in the offer for one unit to be delivered vacant. Then I receive a counter offer with the seller's response stating no units are going to be delivered vacant and it's going to be fully occupied at the close of escrow. So, you can negotiate just about anything in real estate. Um, in continuing our talks and our negotiations, we are going to get one of the units vacant at us at the closing. And so, in negotiating, going back and forth, how motivated is the seller? How motivated is my client? She really wants to live in this area. Those are things that you look at when you're buying multi-unit property. So there's also some risks involved. If you can't vacate the tenants because of the tenant laws, then and you have an idea of living in the property or moving in your family, those are things that you have to look at and talk to a knowledgeable person that has experience in those areas. So, Bill, I know that you have a duplex that you're selling in Hermosa Beach and it's fully occupied. And was the buyer wanting to live in the unit or were they trying to vacate the units? What were they trying to do?
Yeah, in my case, ocean view, small, but I think kept up to date, perhaps not compliant conversion for the second unit, which is common in Hermosa Beach. Two
Mhm.
units occupied by long-staying tenants, um, slightly below market rent, not terribly below, but slightly below market rents. And the buyer wants to live in one of the units. And Hermosa Beach is as restrictive on landlords, I think, as City of Los Angeles. And so you can't, whereas there was a time in Los Angeles that a buyer could displace one of the tenants to live in the house. There was a schedule of costs. It was maybe $10,000 at the most if they were seniors or whatever.
Right.
But now, City of LA did away with that. Basically, you've turned over the property to the tenant, and Hermosa Beach copies that. And so you really can't get them out unless they violate the lease. Now, I think what I say to the buyers and to customers is because the laws change, you need to run the business now very strict. And the second they violate, notice. And the second you can, get them out. Because otherwise, 10 years go by and you can't get them out. And there's nothing you can do about it. And so common problems are having people living in the unit that aren't on the lease. Somebody has they're single, they move in, all of a sudden they have a girlfriend, which may or may not be a problem, or they have
Mm-hmm.
multiple family members. The units aren't built usually for more than one or two people. And so I had a apartment with a 2-bedroom apartment where a family of like 8 or 9, they had grandma and uncle and this and that. And it sounds nice to have everybody there, but think of the sewage, the water, the trash, the noise if you're a neighbor. And so it's not so simple. There's laws on those situations. So again, not so simple to get them out. And we're closing escrow in the next 10 days. And I'm not sure exactly what the lender is doing the loan on the basis of the rentals because the buyer's strong enough to qualify with their income on other things. Most buyers aren't going to qualify that way. And another caution for people is they often look at 2 units and say, well, I'll rent one and that'll cover my rent because they listen to some podcast. And it sounds great. There was a time in America we could buy a duplex and the rent one and that one would cover, 70% of the mortgage, 80% of the
Right.
mortgage,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 90% of the mortgage. There was a time in my career that happened. Not in not in West Los Angeles today, not near the beach towns today, not in what I would say desirable owner-occupied neighborhoods. Like my neighborhood, an old tear-down house, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, might sell for $2 million. A duplex, 1,500 square foot, which are large units, older ones, but nice. That will sell for $4 million or $3.5 million, and the rent
Right.
to cover the rent you'll get maybe is 8,000, 9,000. Won't cover the mortgage of half the property. Not even
Yeah.
close. Not even close. And so, again, that strategy sounds good. And if you can find it, and I do think you can find it in Midwest towns. I have a client who invests in Indiana and buys those properties all the time. He lives there and he moves into one and he rents out the rest. He lives for free and then turns it over and gets another one. Great strategy where the numbers work. So I think at the end of the day, you need to have a lender on your team. We have Shannon as one of our lenders. And I say you have
Mm-hmm.
to have a strategy that's ironclad and appropriate for your market because the things you hear in podcasts, on a national podcast, may or may not be appropriate. Or a podcast that's 2 or 3 years old, those numbers may not apply today.
Right. Especially because the market changes every day and the cost of living goes up. And a lot of people are, they're looking for rental units that they can afford, even if it's maybe not in the area that they'd like to live. But if they can afford the rent, that's where they're going to end up living, even if they have to commute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true.
So, and
And
then Shannon, in terms of qualification, I think maybe we could touch on that as far as if a buyer is looking to purchase a duplex or a triplex and they're going to be qualifying and using 75% of the rents towards their monthly mortgage payment. Let's say there was a situation where the property was fully occupied and there was a 60-day notice that was given to the seller while in escrow. So this way the underwriter sees that the buyer is going to occupy the property. But what happens if, let's say, they're not occupying the property or that condition is not met?
yeah, so I think with FHA, you have to live in the property within 45 days of closing. So if you have a 60-day notice that was given at the open of escrow, when you opened escrow, then obviously we have 30 days for escrow and then 15 days after, you're fine.
How come
But
I
if you
can't
get,
see you?
you can't see me?
No, you're not on the screen anymore.
Oh
You're
my
like
goodness.
a ghost. Uh,
He's in the show, but his camera's been turned off,
Let
I
me
think.
see. What about now?
no.
No.
Let me see.
I mean, you can keep talking. I just can't see you.
Okay. I can see
For
you
radio
guys. Everything.
listeners,
But anyway, long story short, again, you have to occupy the property, especially if you put it as a primary, and
Right.
within 45 days of closing. So again, if that notice 60 days is given right when we open escrow, then you're fine. But on paper, you do have to um, occupy within 45 days. If you're saying you're living there,
Mm-hmm.
that's very, very important. Another thing to add to that too is with the properties being occupied. I'm glad you spoke on that, because the appraiser is also going to look at that and say, hey, what's going on with this property? So, again, with Patricia, and I think having a good agent is very, very important, because a lot of these uh, units are occupied, and the sellers are going to push back and say, no, you deal with it. And I really applaud you, because you fought back and you said, no, you guys, we need one of them being vacant. That's a non-negotiable, and that's something that, and having a good agent will really, is just, really detrimental and very important, because a lot of people would have just said, okay, well, we're just gonna have to deal with it. But no, having a good agent to fight for you to have at least one of those properties vacant is very important, because, again, like Bill says, these units, a lot of them are occupied, a lot of them are paying below market rents. I think this person was paying very low,
Very
very
low.
cheap.
Yeah.
So again, is it going to cover the full mortgage? Not necessarily, but it will help. And like Patricia said, using the other unit as rental income on your loan, you can only use 75%. You can't use that full amount as well. A lot of
Mhm.
my clients say, oh, well, the property's, let's say renting out for 2,000, can I use all that income? I'm like, unfortunately, you can't, because they want to factor in for expenses, for vacancies, things like this, right? That you can
Right.
only use up to 75%. You can't just use that whole amount when it comes to, duplexes, triplexes, things like that. So yes, and then qualifications are the same. You have to be under a certain debt to income ratio. Obviously, that other rental income will help, but you still have debt to income ratios you have to fulfill. You still have credit issues you have to fulfill. The only really difference when it comes to single family and duplex is obviously you have rental income that you can now use. And there obviously has to be a situation on paper where the bank sees that you are going to be able to occupy the property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are all good points. One of the other expenses that most people don't know about are the meters. Some of the older properties do not have separate meters for gas, electricity, especially water. Usually there's a shared water bill. So you want to factor that into your monthly rent.
Mhm. Yeah, that actually, I didn't even think about that either.
Yeah. Yeah.
Utilities.
Some have the tenants pay and some pay the landlord. You better figure it out beforehand. If it's separate, you have the chance to give the tenants. If it's together, you're paying it, and they don't care. If you're a tenant and you live in a building where the owner pays for the water, they're gonna have some long showers. I would, right? You pay if you feel like you're paying top dollar
Have
for
your
for
family come
leaks.
over and do laundry there.
Why not? I mean, again, if the way people look at it, and I think it's fair if you're a tenant, you don't use some services. Maybe you never use the exercise room. Maybe you never use the pool. Maybe you never use the whatever. But if one of the benefits is they don't charge you for water, you better believe I'd have some long showers. I do some singing. I have some rock concerts in there. Uh, I'd be like, okay. Hey, real quick, I know, Shannon, you want to talk a little bit about this article that came out from NER that shows that first-time home buyers are 21%. That's a historic low of the market. And the median, the middle age of a person buying their first house in America today is 40 years old. What's up with that?
Yeah, I mean, do you guys think this is going to get any better? I mean, we're seeing affordability issues. We're seeing, people credit card debt is at an all-time high. I've only been in this industry for, I would full time 4 years. So, you guys, I want to hear from you guys. Have this, for me, it seems ever since I've gotten in this industry, like it's just one thing after another. So it's like
Yeah.
something is going on, but I don't know if this is normal or not. At this point, the abnormal is normal. Uh, you know,
Well,
I
I,
don't
I was laughing at the news headlines yesterday because the news headline wants to make it sound as though the current administration is creating a housing affordability crisis. And I've been in real estate for about 40 years. We've been nonstop marching towards a housing affordability crisis every year for the
know.
entire 40 years. And
Oh wow.
policies at the state, local, and national level have only made things worse. Um, And I think this title is, on one hand, is alarming and should be, and is also misleading. And what I mean by that is, what's alarming is that young couples can't afford, or young people can't afford to buy houses and give up. And I know that that's not good for society. It's not good that people who are married and trying to form families either can't afford to have families, or can't live where they can raise their kids in the schools and the neighborhood they want to be, and or afford a house. I think adds some stability and opportunity, and not for everybody, but for a lot of people. And so that should be alarming. At the same time, the fact that I think there's a little bit of bias, that the fact that it's older, because there's a whole room of older people who never owned a house until they're 40 years old. According to this, half of the people buying are below 40, half are above 40. It means there's people who are 50 who never owned a house before. So I think that we want to say, oh, it's terrible, we need more young people. Yeah, for sure. But we also have older people who contribute to society, pay taxes, and also have been priced out of the market. And I think the bigger issue is that we've made housing so hard to afford by making building housing expensive. And the more the government gets involved, the worse it seems to get. And I think the answer always feels like, well, the government needs to do a program, needs to do this, needs that. How about less? How about, I came in the mortgage industry when the government only controlled 20% of the mortgages. Now they control like 95% of the mortgages. Maybe that's not good. Maybe just like the education system, we didn't have a Department of Education, and we had great test scores. Now we have one for 40 years, and our test scores are very low amongst developed countries. So this should be very alarming at a lot of levels. It's bad for young people can't buy. It's bad for older people who aren't being able to buy a house until they're 40 or 50. And I think that, but I think that what I don't like about NAR's publicity and a lot of the news is the answer doesn't mean the government has to have a new program or tax more people. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe the problem is we tax too much and regulate too much, and we need to go back to how things were more affordable by less regulated. That's my 2 cents.
So you think it's regulation that's stopping people from building,
Oh,
or
yeah.
and
Oh,
then
in LA,
that's
for sure.
creating the inventory shortage?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, you tell people you can't have gas, or have to have gas appliances, or you have to have solar, you have to have this
Yeah.
standard. Yeah, I think that the more the government gets involved in decisions, and again, it's not like our government officials are made of housing affordability experts. No, most of them never had any industry experience. Some of them never owned a house before. They just
Yeah.
want to have a program that they have their name on, that they can then say, oh, I voted for $100 million to go to loans for low-income people. And that's not really what it is. What happens, these programs, it gives the government officials more power in deciding who gets to rent these properties. Why are we making property limited by income? Don't we give low-income people rental vouchers so they can afford to buy rent? Why do we have to do both? The answer is the government gets more and more power, and it makes it hard for taxpayers. I think it's a direct contrast. There's no increased government power without taking that power from taxpayers or non-government.
So maybe if you want to buy a house pretty soon, you also got to make sure who you're voting for. That's maybe also important. But Patricia, what do you have to say about this?
Well, I think there's certain things that also affect the affordability, and things that happen in people's life that will also prevent them or I should say, the priority for a lot of people is their family. So we also have the sandwich generation where, like me, example, I'm 54 years old. My sister and I take care of my parents, and my kid still lives at home, right? So we have a lot of multi-generational living where people are not getting raises. They're not getting those promotions at work where they're going to increase their pay to match the current, environment that we're living in as far as cost of living, prices for food, gas, things like that, healthcare. So people will prioritize, instead of buying a home, they're going to just get together with their family, live together so they can save money, take care of their family, their kids, and their parents. And then if the parents are no longer here by the time they're 40, 50 years old, then at that point, they may be buying their own home, right? So, I have buyers that I'm working with right now that are in their 30s, and they're also in their 40s. And some of those buyers are looking for a home, like a next gen home where they can live with their family, take care of their parents, and they're going to share in that mortgage payment. Um, so that's what I'm seeing a lot of right now too.
Yeah. I've actually seen people too that have asked me how about refinancing because instead of the kids going out and buying a home, they want to build in the back of their parents' house.
Right.
I've actually had a few of those situations come up to me. So
Right.
that
Because it's
sandwich
cheaper
generation is very
to,
real.
yeah, it could be cheaper to buy, to build a home in the back of your parents' home. So in this case, you're not really needing to go out and buy your own home. You're just going to live with your parents and have, under a separate roof, but on the same lot.
Yeah.
That's a mixed bag in that it's good for people who have a house. It makes your house more valuable. They've changed the laws, so you have a house that's worth X, and if now you can build a unit in the back for your kids, your grandparents, a tenant, your house is worth more money. The downside of that people think about is sometimes that second unit is in a neighborhood surrounded by single family homes. Like in my neighborhood, they build them on top of garages. They build two-story units. Now you think you have a nice private single family home and you have some tenant from your neighbor looking down into your backyard, and it kind of limits your privacy and or maybe a sense of security. So I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying
There's some
these
cons.
things, there's trade-offs, and I think these things are worthy of discussions. And what the problem is, we have these rules passed in Sacramento and then forced into cities, whereas the best answer is always a more local answer. I think we should, as
Mhm.
neighborhoods and we as cities, should vote on the standards we want that make sense for our city, and then not be told by the state government or federal government how it has to be, and because it's better for us. I don't think anybody wants to be told, by their parents or by anybody, the government, what's better for them. So these are complicated issues that sound good, and in the context of politics, people get excited about and vote for, and then they realize, oh, that didn't work out so well. Wonder why? And these ADUs have been challenging. That again, for some people, they're been great, and I have customers who really they have their parents or they have their kids, and then I have other people who are really upset because they lost their sense of privacy in very exclusive home areas. So it's one of those trade-offs. We'll see. Hey, we need to wrap up here. I know we got a lot to talk about. We didn't get to some of the stuff, so I'm sorry. But for those of you who want more, come back next week. We do this. We release a new episode every Friday. At Bill Gross Probate. Patricia, how do people get a hold of you?
My cell phone, 323-365-9909.
And our good friend and colleague Shannon, the lender, who disappeared on us today. You can make him
You guys still
appear
can't
if you
see
reach
me?
out to him.
No.
No. How do you reach out to you
Oh
and find you, Shannon? Maybe
my-
they'll call you and you'll FaceTime them and
ho-
they can see you.
hopefully
And as handsome
my
as you are, really, if I look like you, I'd be all over the place. I wouldn't disappear. I wouldn't disappear because I'm me. But go ahead. How
I
does he get a
swear
hold
to
of you?
God, I can see myself weird. But you can reach out. My number 661-317-8484 or my handle FUND Fund with Shannon. That's
Fantastic. Hey,
great.
guys, thanks so much. Have a great weekend. And we'll talk soon. Bye bye.